Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are fixing a giant mistake. As you can see in my beautiful wooden tray, I left drinks that were too cold on it overnight, and I woke up to these super noticeable, really awful condensation rings on my wooden tray. Normally this tray is just a gorgeous, beautiful, deep, rich color. It's made out of walnut wood, and I usually do a pretty good job of keeping it oiled and well maintained. But it's been a while and I kind of let it slip. And of course, that's the time that I forgot and left drinks on it overnight. So not good, but I searched the internet for a recipe of a cleaner that I could do to clean it that did not involve, ironing the wood or sanding it down or anything, because it really is a beautiful tray. And I am testing that out in today's video. So the first step was to let it dry. So I let it dry overnight, and you can see that it actually helped reduce the look of the rings. I think a lot of it was that it was still wet and the rings were swollen. I started filming this as soon as I took the cups off the tray. So you can see that just letting it dry already does a lot of good things for it. So now that the tray is dry and on my kitchen counter, I am going to be making my cleaning, scrubbing, oiling solution, and it is equal parts distilled white vinegar and extra virgin olive oil. So I'm just going to use a tablespoon of each and mix it up really, really well, and then get a soft cloth to apply it with. This is actually the same cloth that I usually oil my tray with, and I figured when I'm done getting the rings out of it, I'll just oil it like normal so that it is protected against future damage, and then we should be good to go from there. So here we go. So basically just dip your cloth in and rub it over the rings. That's what it said online. And I guess the vinegar helps clean it out, and then the oil seals it. Normally I don't use olive oil on this board. I use a food grade mineral oil to oil it with, but they said olive oil, so that's what I'm using. And I'm just getting like a nice thick amount of it on there. I'm just gonna leave it for a couple minutes. And when I was moving this board, I actually noticed like a weird mark in the back. So while this dries, I'm gonna flip it over and try and get that out of the back. The camera's doing a lovely job hiding it, but I promise it's super visible to me, at least in real life. So I'm just gonna go over that with some oil as well, and hopefully we can get that out too. You can see the grain of this wood is stunning, but it's a little dull because I have been negligent in my upkeep of it, but it's going to be beautiful when it's done. It always is after I oil it, and I'm just really hoping I'm able to get the rings out at this point. The back damage is not as bad as the front, so I'm just kind of wiping it off really quick and seeing if just like a little TLC can help reverse that. But we're going to go back to the front. And now that it's been sitting on there for a little bit, we're just going to buff it out a little bit with a part of the cloth that doesn't have the oil vinegar mixture on it. And then we're going to let it dry for a couple minutes and then take a look and see what we're left with. Hopefully it's enough to get the rings out, or at the very least help reduce them a little bit. Honestly, I wasn't expecting them to get as lightened by the drying as they did. So I'm already like way less nervous about it than I was when I started. When I started, I was like, oh my God, my tray's ruined. But it's already looking pretty good. So we're gonna let that dry for a little bit and see what we're left with. So here is the close-up of what we're looking at. The one on the left side, the really thick little chunky one, is still pretty visible. It's not anything as bad as it was when I first spotted it, but I mean, you can still see it. The one over to the right, however, did a really good job of coming out. You can see the difference in the wood grain, like where it was oiled versus not. It's got this protective sheen to it versus being super porous and gonna pull it in. So you can kind of see it, I guess, a little bit in the light, but honestly, this side I think is like basically good. So already I'm thinking this totally works, and I'm just really hoping that I'm able to lighten the ring on the other side, because that one's still pretty visible to me. Like it's a lighter color. It's fine. It's not like super eye-catching, but we're going to see if we can do a little bit better. So I'm going to go back in with my olive oil apple cider vinegar mix and just kind of let it get on there and soak the same way we did the first time. Just let it sit for, like a minute or two, not super long, before we buff it out. Same as before, basically just repeating the process, using the clean part of the cloth and trying to wipe up a little bit of the excess oil. I'm going with the grain of the wood and just kind of giving it a nice little, drying / taking off the extra oil / kind of rubbing it in a little bit just to make it you know, a little bit better than it was. I'm checking the backside too, just to see how that scratch is doing. This one's a little bit better, but still visible to me. You actually really can't see it on the camera, which is a bummer. But I'm just gonna go back in with a little bit of oil. You can see the big swash of oil that I did earlier compared to the rest of the wood. This wood is like super thirsty. So I'm gonna oil it down all the way. This is the oil that I use when I'm just taking care of this tray. I had a lot of really good reviews on Amazon, and all the instructions for it are on the bottle. So basically you just put some on and then quickly kind of cover all of the surfaces of your wood in a thin little layer of it. So I just make sure to really make sure that everything is covered. I do all the sides, all the nooks and crannies of it, and then just kind of let it sit. Like, don't super rub it off, just make sure everything's covered in your first rub down. So you can already see a huge difference in the wood between what it started as and what it looks like when it's oiled. It really just brings back the beautiful color and luster of the wood. So I do enjoy doing this every once in a while. I can still see that mark, so I'm gonna dribble a little bit extra oil there just to like let it sink in. It's really not bad, but you know, I don't think it'll hurt anything. Do make sure to cover all of the sides and nooks and crannies and just like every part of the wood, because you don't want part of it drying out and part of it being super like moisturized and taken care of, because not only will it look weird, but it could like warp over time if like part of it's all dried and shriveled and the rest is not. So I did the sides. I didn't show that on camera because it like filmed weird, but I'm gonna go back in and cover the front with oil and just buff that out and see what we are left with as far as those pesky little rings. I'm gonna dribble a little bit extra oil and just kind of rub it in and let that sit longer as I'm oiling the whole front of the tray. So you go in same as you did on the back. I like to keep my finger in a small part of the cloth that's got the oil on it, and that way I'm really just spreading the oil around the surface of the wood rather than absorbing it in the clean, dry part of the towel. I do use that part of the towel later, so I want to keep it as free from oil as possible and just make sure I get a nice even coat. Look at that gorgeous color coming through. Like, as soon as you swipe the oil across it, it's just beautiful. It does look a little like slimy and super shiny right now, and that's just because there's excess oil on there and you're not going to leave it on there, but it doesn't hurt to leave it on for like a minute or two and just let it sink in and just kind of fully saturate the wood as it needs to. Make sure you get the corners and the joints. That's really important. And then just leave it on there to dry for a minute or two. This is just from the directions of the bottle. And then you're going to use the clean part of the cloth, the dry part that doesn't have any oil on it, and just kind of wipe off the extra oil and just kind of like buff it out a little bit. So to do this, I'm starting with the back of the tray because that's had the oil on it the longest, and just kind of going with the grain of the wood. That's not super important because it's not like a really rough abrasive texture. It's a soft cloth, but we're just removing the extra oil, the stuff that's going to come up on the cloth. After this, the bottle says basically it's good to go. I found that it is still a little oily, so I do let mine air dry like on the counter or on the floor leaning up against the wall before I put it back down on the ottoman or any sort of fabric, because the oil will leach into fabric for a little bit after you wipe it off and it's dry. So just let it like air out for half an hour or so, but wipe off the extra oil. You can already see your beautiful tray coming back to life with the color and the sheen, and it's just beautiful and fully protected now against drink glasses, which now that has happened, of course, I'm gonna be super careful, but it is what it is. And we are ready for the big reveal. So take a look at this tray. It looks beautiful. It's completely dried from the oiling, so you can see the shininess goes away and it just looks like beautiful lustrous wood. These are the corners where it had the damage. That was a really bad one, but you can compare it against a corner without damage and like you really can't even tell. So I'm super pleased with how this turns out. Here is another corner without any damage, just for comparison against a corner that had damage originally. You can't tell. Like, it looks fabulous. You really can't tell that this looked completely ruined just a day ago. So I'm very, very pleased. This definitely works. You can even see on the back that it just works super well. And like the mark is gone. The only marks there are the marks that came with the wood, just from the original manufacturing and milling. But yeah, this is a really great hack, a really great way to rescue your non-finished wood furniture from condensation rings.